Chapter 32, Chapter 29, The City of God. Breath of Fire 2, War of the Demons. Book 3, Hero. Chapter 29, The City of God. The holy city of ARandomAudiobookAppeared was the most impenetrable location known to man. It was not that the city itself was particularly fortified, for in truth, it needed no such fortifications. The walls around it were ceremonial, built for appearance alone, and the three massive gates at east, west, and south were not even guarded. To the north, of course, was the massive grand cathedral of St. Eva, looming ominously over the rest of the glittering city of God. What made ARandomAudiobookAppeared so unassailable was the location it resided. Beyond the lush green hills surrounding the city, the island bearing the same name rose a mile above the ocean's surface, sheer cliffs on all sides with no way of gaining access. Only the Church of St. Eva knew a way onto the island, and they kept that to themselves. The only ones allowed access were the most loyal devotees of the faith. Never had anybody opposed to their activities ever dreamed of gaining access to the heart of the church, until now. Over the ocean waves, a gigantic bird raced, nearly the size of a house. Her shape was that of a raptor, but her feathers a vibrant pink for the most part, with all the colors of the rainbow along her wings and tail. As her massive wings carried her towards ARandomAudiobookAppeared, 9 men and women rode on her back, some clinging tightly while others raised their heads in the wind without fear. They had flown all day and night from Windia, capital city of Winland, in the northern part of the world, to reach ARandomAudiobookAppeared in the south. Now, as a new dawn cast its light over the waves, their destination came within their sight. The bird touched down upon ARandomAudiobookAppeared's surface, well out of sight of the city itself, and rested her head wearily. Aside from diving to snatch up an occasional large fish, she had done nothing but continue towards their destination ever since they had set out. One by one, its passengers slid off of her back and stood upon the hillside, stretching their legs. Fast travel, all things considered, Ryu Battison, leader of the mercenary group Dragon Kin and last known descendant of the vanished Light Dragon clan, said quietly as he looked over the island. Young, strong, and human to the eye, clad for trouble in light plate mail over his white undershirt and red slacks, he bore a claymore on his back that he had used many times on foes both mundane and demonic, as well as the occasional random monster. Most people assumed his blue ponytail to be dyed, having forgotten that such a hue had been a mark of his heritage in centuries long past. Yeah, even by whale riding, that would have taken a week, Baodogi, his second-in-command, grunted. Stout and cheerful-looking, Ryu's best friend and constant companion since their childhood had mixed heritage from the Lupin Forest clan and Lapine Grass Runner clan, giving him the features of a beagle and a coat of red and white fur. He was all business at the moment, though, his favorite green robe and white leggings covered in similar plate mail to Ryu's. He carried a double-shot crossbow with the eye to use it, though he specialized in healing magic. I'll go see if there's any wild animals around here, Kat-chan, Ryu's most frequent partner on a close-range, purely physical basis, said as she did a complicated-looking series of stretching exercises, some of which even seemed to involve her lashing tail. I need to work the kinks out anyways, and we could all use something better to eat than traveling rations. A short, slim, acrobatic girl of the feline Warren clan, Kat's cute appearance belied a ridiculous strength granted by her heritage. Thanks to the tawny, shaggy fur covering her body from the waist down, she normally only wore a purple top, but when out on a job she added an enchanted robe cut down to allow total freedom of movement, the magic providing protection without bulkiness. Pulling her steel battle staff, a custom weapon with 3-inch length blades at each end from her back, she gave Ryu a pointed grin, green eyes glittering beneath her short red hair, before heading off. Nothing ever slows her down for long, does it? Sten Legacy, their knife man, commented wryly. A hunched, lanky, brown-furred simian of the Highlander clan, he too wore plate mail over his blue vest and shorts. Though he appeared unarmed, there were almost certainly at least 4 different daggers of various styles and sizes concealed on his person. Not really, Rand Marks, the team's other healer, replied as he got off the bird last. Like all of the farm clan, he was a 10-foot mass of muscle in a leathery gray hide, with cloven feet, a round brown shell on his back, and a tiny, long-snout head. Over his purple toga, he wore a massive suit of ridiculous-looking but functional stone armor, the only full set they'd ever found that would fit his giant frame. His only weapons were the red-tinted steel knuckle guards he wore on his fists. Looking over his shoulder at another of the girls, he lowered his voice. How is she? Exhausted, but happy, as far as I can tell, Nina Windia, princess of the Wing clan, said quietly, stroking the great bird's neck feathers. I think she knows that she's brought us where we need to go, and she's proud of that. A delicate, pale blonde beauty in robes similar to Kat's covering her deep blue blouse and skirt, she hovered off the ground on black feathered wings, green eyes sorrowful. She was just as skilled in the magical arts as Bao and Rand, but her talents were in destruction rather than creation. At the moment, however, her thoughts were of mourning for her younger sister Mina, a pretty young girl who had been a close friend of the rest of the group as well. Against all of their attempts to stop her, she had surrendered her form and consciousness to be transformed permanently into the great bird, so that the group could gain flight and thus reach their destination. It had been that sacrifice that had triggered their long-fought decision to do whatever it took to see the job through to the end, even if it meant surrendering to destiny's strings intent on pulling them into glorification as heroes, a role most of them felt that they were ill-suited for.
One can only hope, yes.
One of the only exceptions to that, Prince Ikaru Hapi di Petapeta, who usually went by Jean. For obvious reasons, said sadly. A rotund young man of the frog-like creeper clan with dark green skin, he wore plate mail over his rich blue doublet, white hose and red scarf, all of which made him the most fashionable member of the troupe when they weren't wearing their business clothes. Even when on the street, however, he still kept his rapier belted at his waist, a testament to the experience in combat belying his artistic temperament. Jean had known both sisters since his own childhood and theirs, when he had often gone on diplomatic missions from Sima to Windia and vice versa, on top of being the most emotional member of the team. Despite his often silly personality and cheerful attitude, however, he was a thorough professional and a master fencer along with a basic knowledge of both black and white magic, though he specialized in neither.
Judging from my experience with avian life forms, I believe that would be a correct assessment.
Their other jack of all trades, and the only member of the group who was neither male nor female, said calmly. Spar was a grass man, a sentient humanoid that was actually a plant rather than an animal, and thus apparently lacking in gender. Frail and delicate aside from the thorned whip on its belt, it had never actually said if the leafy green covering over most of its body was actually clothing or part of its body, only its hands and head seemed made of petals instead, a vibrant pink fading to white.
Do you think she's going to stick around here?
The group's last member asked curiously.
This has never happened before, so I don't know what her migratory habits will be like.
Dees, immortal sorceress and last of the Indigo clan, was an ageless beauty who rose from the sleep of millennia whenever her knowledge was needed. From the waist down, her body was that of a snake. Above it, she typically wore low-cut purple blouses and matching kerchiefs atop her long blue hair. Her only weapon was a stout wooden cane, but her talent for offensive magic was unequaled even by Nina.
I can't say for sure, but somehow, I get the feeling she'll stay around me, wherever I go,
the princess guessed, finally turning away from the bird that had been her sister.
She'll stay out of sight, but if I call for her, she'll come. We'll have to remember to cut down on the warp spell, then, so she doesn't lose us,
Ryu noted as they all watched the great bird take off into the sky once more. After a moment, he sighed and turned back towards Evray.
Alright, as soon as Kat gets back with breakfast, we're heading in. Remember, this is only reconnaissance right now. We'll walk around for a bit, take in the layout of the place, then head back home to plan how we're actually going to infiltrate the Grand Cathedral, and any other part of the city that's necessary.
It had been about 6 months since Ryu and Bao had started putting together their team. Prior to that, they had both been rangers for several years, but their long-term plan had always been to go independent once they were able to find others who they trusted to join up. Several adventures that had quickly grown entirely out of control had brought them into contact with the others, one at a time, and they had soon set up business in the ruins of a city in southern Oria, the largest building of which was now their headquarters. Unfortunately, it hadn't been that simple. Said incidents had also continually found them involved in various plots by actual, real-life demons, which most of them had previously believed to only exist in stories and religious dogma. Eventually, they had ended up taking down the demon lords Kawadara, Shapukai, and Aruhameral, each a nightmare in their own right, in order to foil their attempts at subverting entire countries in the service of their mysterious god. Kat had been a fighter in the Colosseum of Corsair until the demonic manager, August Conti, had decided she had outlived her usefulness. Rand was a friend of hers working construction who had readily helped her and Ryu deal with the problem, and came along for the ride after all was said and done. Nina was studying in the Orion Magic School when the leader of the Joker gang, another demon, had tried to blackmail her into his service, unbeknownst to any of them at the time. Dees had been her roommate for years, laying low until the time was right to reveal her identity to them. Stan was nothing more than an itinerant street magician and con man when he had joined up, but years ago he had been a general in the armies of Highland, serving alongside Shapukai for years until the horrors of war had finally cracked him, leading him to fake his death in desert. Jean had been adventuring in the countryside of Sima until Kawadara impersonated him and tried to wrest control of the throne from his family. Spar had been an unwilling exhibit in a traveling circus run by the demonic ringmaster, MC. Tusk. Even Bao had been framed for theft by Count Trout, a local nobleman. Except for Dees, whose involvement was still partially a mystery to the man, their clerk/agent, the septuagenarian transient Nero Mani, each and every one of them had found themselves targeted by agents of Infinity, Ryu most of all. They'd eventually discovered that the loss of his hometown, sister, and father at an early age had been the work of Aruhameral and the gargantuan abomination known as Baruberi, who made even the demon lords seem like simple monsters by comparison and whose voice had haunted Ryu's dreams ever since. At the same time, abandoned statues of the dragon god Loden had began speaking cryptically to them, though only few clans still worshipped he whose faith had once dominated the world in this day and age. The rest of the world, including Ryu, Bao, and Kat, were devoted to the Church of Saint Eva. Perhaps because of this, it had taken far too long for them to catch on to the fact that so many of the demons were connected to the church. Only when Ran's mother had been abducted and her land stolen by a corrupt paladin did they begin to suspect the worst. As it turned out, Ryu and Nina were both distantly descended from several generations of heroes of the same names and clans, who had led bands of companions to save the world from the forces of evil. The group had initially reacted to this with distaste, preferring simply to live their lives and earn a steady paycheck, but when it had become increasingly apparent just how much the forces of infinity had screwed with all of their lives, they reluctantly concluded that the only way to do so would be to exterminate the demons, one and all.
So, we just drift in there and act casual?
Sten asked once they had finished eating the wild boar Kat had brought back and carved up the leftovers for later.
Seeing as how we don't have any idea how people normally come in, that's the best we can try for.
Ryu shrugged.
One reason why we're just looking around for now. Probably not a good idea to stick around too long, in case anybody gets suspicious. Keep an eye out for any paladins, in particular. They're probably going to be the biggest thing to worry about on the street level. Let's hope we don't run into Ray,
Kat muttered quietly, not meeting Ran's eyes. Ray Braddock, one of the paladins of the church, had been a friend and ally of theirs who had worked with them to find and eradicate the demons, unaware of the corruption within his own faith. Despite their best efforts, he had prevented them from taking vengeance on the fellow paladin who had been responsible for the disappearance of Ran's mother, and they hadn't had contact with him since. To say that relations were strained would be putting it lightly.
Or that asshole, Gabriel,
Bao said, shaking his head.
Yet, anyways. We'll want to run into somewhere nice and secluded, where we can take our time with him. If we encounter him on the streets, there's no way in hell he won't recognize us, after that beating Rand gave him. The foul villain may still live at the moment, but justice cannot be eluded for long, mon amis,
Jean told them as they all stood up and started walking, or flying, or slithering, around the hill towards Evray.
Soon enough, we will call him to account for them. Jean's right.
Ryu nodded.
We'll get him sooner or later, and everybody else involved with him. Right now, though, we scout. Just keep a low profile, and try to fit in as well as we can. Easier said than done for some of us, Chief,
Dees pointed out.
Even if this place is nice and multicultural, which I'm not entirely sure is going to be the case, me and Spar are still going to stick out like a couple of real sore thumbs. Can't you turn into a human?
Bao pointed out.
You spent how many years in that form back in Oria? 1. That spell takes hours to set up, and it's a pain in the ass, she pointed out. 2. It freaking hurts. 3. It'd be a waste of time and effort. A nice, simple visual illusion spell would work just as well.
Nobody said anything for a few moments.
So, then,
Spar said eventually.
Why don't you do that? Maybe I will, smart guy,
she replied irritably, raising her staff in the air.
Hold on.
Ryu raised his hand.
Could you do that for all of us? Make us all look like ordinary humans? Well, okay, I don't need it, but everybody else. Not by myself, no.
She shook her head.
One downside to illusion spells. They're continual, rather than initial. I'll have to maintain it the whole time. I could do maybe 3 of us, 4 at the most, but any more than that and it'd fall apart after only a few minutes. What if the rest of us helped you maintain it?
Nina asked.
You would have to cast it by yourself, of course, since none of the rest of us know that spell, but as long as you linked us to it when you did so, we'd at least be able to help with the focusing and maintaining.
She paused for a moment.
Well, those of us with strong magical talents, anyways. Nothing personal, Kat, but I don't think any of us would want to see what would happen if you tried that. Yeah, it'd probably go about as well as you in a boxing match,
the other girl teased her right back. Despite their completely opposite personalities, the two of them had quickly become best friends during their time together.
Should work,
Dees agreed, ignoring that.
Okay, then. Nina, Bao, Rand, Spar, pay attention.
Raising her staff in the air, she began muttering strange words that Ryu had no hope of understanding, let alone pronouncing. He had always suspected that the chants used for magic were simply gibberish whose only meaning was as a focusing method, but that might simply have been because he was completely useless at magic aside from the breath of fire inherent to the dragon clan, which didn't really count.
How strange.
Jean raised a hand to his cheek as the spell took hold.
I don't feel a thing. Like I said, it's only a visual illusion,
Dees explained, as she once more stood before them in the form of the teenaged girl that Ryu, Bao, and Nina had all known for years before discovering the truth. Oddly enough, now that he had seen her true form, Ryu couldn't see much of a difference aside from her legs. Her features had always had something of an odd, timeless quality about them.
So don't go touching anything, let alone anybody. But it'll make us all look like ordinary humans. I guess that's what's important,
Sten commented, scratching his chin. The Highlander had become a lean, lanky man with harsh features and a short beard.
Wish I had a mirror, though. I never really thought about what I'd look like if I was anything but a Highlander. You're telling me?
Rand folded his arms. He was perhaps the most visibly different, having lost a great deal of his height and bulk, even if he was still fairly burly. Bald and middle-aged, he looked like a professional bruiser, or perhaps a tavern bouncer, though not an unhandsome one.
I look ridiculous, don't I? Actually, I'm suspecting some personal bias on the part of the primary spellcaster here,
Bao commented, rubbing his face. Now a stout, cheerful-looking young man with short brown hair, he raised an eyebrow as he glanced at Ryu.
Pretty weird seeing you with normal hair, buddy. You changed me, too.
Ryu blinked.
It's probably for the best,
Nina told him, arms demurely folded behind her back. The loss of her wings was the only difference in her form, though walking instead of floating everywhere would probably be a little strange for her outdoors.
Dyed hair might be in style right now, but the idea is not to stand out. Hey.
Kat blinked. Hers was one of the most dissonant appearances, as the changes made to her form and features were some of the most subtle. Her face was the same, but pointed ears and sharp teeth, cheek stripes and clawed fingers were all gone along with her fur, tail, and the shape of her feet.
Ryu's hair isn't dyed. It's supposed to be blue. Yes, but we would hardly be informing potentially hostile pedestrians of that face, would we, Mademoiselle Cat?
Jean pointed out. Stout but handsome, with long blonde curls, he looked like a slightly overweight poet or artist, both of which he actually was. She slowly nodded.
Okay, that makes sense. We gotta get going, then.
Ryu raised an eyebrow.
One question, first,
Spar said, sounding unamused. Even as a human, it looked like a strong breeze could blow it over, pale and stick-thin with androgynous features and long, auburn hair.
Since I am incapable of examining myself, in the interest of maintaining the masquerade, it would be best if I were to know whether I now appear to be male or female. I made it hard to tell on purpose,
Dees explained.
It could go either way. I don't think anybody's going to ask, but if they do, it's your choice. Ah.
The disguised grass man considered this.
Thank you, Dees. That was very considerate of you. I think I will be female, then. It would probably be best if the balance between genders was as close to equal as possible. This is one of the weirdest conversations I have ever had.
Bao shook his head.
Let's just go, already. Man, where have you been?
Kat asked dryly as they continued around the hill and down the road towards the holy city.
This is normal for us. Ugh.
Passing through the southern gate without any trouble, the group found themselves standing in a vision of grandeur that made even the richest parts of the rest of the world's capital cities pale in comparison. Every home was a manor of gleaming white marble, and every business a tower of the same. The streets were wide and appeared to actually be paved with gold, against every expectation and belief in the basic nature of man. Even the air was fresh and warm, with none of the pervasive smells of a normal city even a tenth of this size present.
Wow,
Kat whispered, eyes wide.
Just. Wow. First one to try and pry up the street gets clocked,
Dees said quietly.
Fair warning. Seconded,
Ryu agreed.
No drawing attention to ourselves, no matter how tempting. Something is wrong here,
Spar warned them as they passed by a small park, one of many by the looks of it. Even the trees and grass were impossibly vibrant.
Very, very wrong. Tell me, do those plants look healthy to you? Healthiest I've ever seen,
Rand replied.
And I know plants. As do I.
Spar shook its head.
And not only with my eyes. The breath of nature allows me to commune with them, and I assure you, we are not the only ones under a visual illusion. I can sense nothing coming from those trees, nor the grass. They are dead, or worse than dead. Well,
Sten said after they all mulled that over for a moment.
There ain't no way to misconstrue that as anything but creepy. Oh, hello.
A loud voice suddenly came from behind them.
Are you new to ARandomAudiobookAppeared?
They turned around to see a cheerful-looking young man beaming at them, his face bright and guileless.
I haven't seen you before. When did you arrive? Just this morning,
Ryu lied quickly.
Brother Gabriel brought us here. I wondered where he had been.
The man looked around as other smiling pedestrians began glancing their way.
Everybody, we have newcomers.
They all brightened up even further, and began to crowd around them, eager to shake hands and in some cases even give quick hugs.
Welcome to ARandomAudiobookAppeared,
a middle-aged woman said.
It's the happiest place in the world. Isn't it great to be here, in the city of God himself?
A man, who seemed to be her husband by the way he was holding her hand, asked them.
Only the truly faithful are allowed here. You'll never have to set eyes on a heretic ever again. Really, now?
Nina asked innocently. Like most of her clan, she was atheistic, despite having met the dragon god in person.
Never? That's amazing. You think that's amazing? Wait until nightfall.
A young man winked at her.
You know why? Because it never happens. Saint Eva's light always shines here, so it's always daytime, and it's always warm, even in the heart of winter. You'll never get sick again in your life, either.
An old man informed them, grinning.
Nobody does in ARandomAudiobookAppeared. I was dying of illness when Father Habaruko himself brought me here, and within a week, I was cured. Oh, I always hated when that would happen,
Spar replied, entirely seriously, prompting an elbow nudge from Dees.
It's the perfect place to raise a family, too.
A young woman with a toddler in her arms told them.
My husband and I just had our first child, and we're raising him here, so that he'll never have to live outside of Saint Eva's protection. Yeah.
The child cheered.
Yeah. Praise Saint Eva. Now that's what I want to hear.
Kat grinned just as broadly as the people, though it looked a little strained.
I've been waiting all my life to come here, just for that. Are some of you betrothed already, then?
A young woman asked, giggling.
Most of us, actually.
Dees batted her eyes at Rand.
We've been waiting to get married until we could do so in the Grand Cathedral, though. Right, darling? Yeah.
Rand slowly nodded, face wooden. His clan followed the Namandian faith, and his feelings towards the church were even more violent than the rest of the groups.
That's right. Hope we can do that soon. Dear. Well, anybody who isn't won't have any trouble finding somebody here.
Another young man said, arm linked with a girl. Both of them looked like they'd just stepped out of a painting.
I was never lucky myself, but almost as soon as I moved here, me and Jane were betrothed. We're getting married next spring, and I've never been happier. Praise Saint Eva. What is it like in the outside world?
A middle-aged woman asked curiously.
You're the first newcomers we've seen in a long time, aside from Miss Parsha.
She glanced around.
Clarice? Is Clarice around here? Oh, it doesn't look like it. The same as always.
Sten shrugged.
Turmoil and strife. The rest of the world never changes in that regard, does it? No, I suppose it doesn't.
Another woman shook her head.
A pity. If only the whole world followed the teachings of Saint Eva. Then there would be nothing but peace, for all eternity. Perhaps someday, that will come to pass. Of course, everybody here prays to Saint Eva every day,
an old woman boasted.
We wouldn't have been able to come here if we didn't. Same here.
Ryu said casually.
As a matter of fact, we've been looking forward to seeing the Grand Cathedral. Can we visit it now? What?
The man who had first seen them asked, confused, as the rest of the crowd fell silent.
No, of course not. We only enter the Grand Cathedral when Father Habaruka calls a sermon. The only ones allowed inside the rest of the week are the priests and paladins.
Their faces were blank for a moment, and then everybody suddenly reverted, continuing to cheer and welcome them.
Anyways, it's always wonderful, here in ARandomAudiobookAppeared. Where have you been given houses?
A woman asked.
Are they over in Brightways? Yeah, that's where we were told to go.
Bao jumped on that, eyes keen.
Brightways. We were just looking for it. It's over on the east side, near the gate,
a young woman's voice called from the back of the crowd.
You should stop by and see Miss Parsha, she's just moved in herself. We'd show you the way, but we should probably all get back to our business. Diligence, and all.
That seemed to set off an almost automatic reaction. The crowd broke up with a chorus of farewells, many of them even waving as Ryu and the others headed northeast.
Okay,
Kat whispered once they were a safe distance from everybody else.
That was a little weird. More than a little.
Dee's face was bleak.
Ryu, you might want to check the dragon's tear right about now. Hey.
Ryu blinked, reaching for the string around his neck.
They were freaky, but I don't think they could all be demons.
The dragon's tear was the only thing his mother had left him, a teardrop-shaped jewel in a silver setting that he always wore. When directed towards another person, it exhibited a basic form of emotional telepathy, changing colors to reflect the person's feelings towards the bearer. Most notably, it went black when aimed at a demon. This time, however, when he tried using it on the townspeople, it did something it never had before. It went absolutely transparent.
Hey.
Ryu frowned at it, suddenly worried.
It's not broken, is it?
He pointed it at Bao, and relaxed as it went the same bright, light blue it had been for many years.
Okay, looks like it still works.
He tried it on several of the others as well, and received familiar, positive readings from them too, though he carefully avoided both Kat and Nina. Trying it on the pedestrians again, however, continued to make it go blank.
What the hell? That's never happened before. I don't like that one bit, man.
Bao growled. He knew how the jewel worked almost as well as Ryu did, though he had never actually tried it himself.
That was just creepy back there, when you asked about the Grand Cathedral. What the hell even happened? I thought they were faking us out when they asked us where we were living, you know, the old drop a name that doesn't exist test because of that, but I wasn't sure, so I took it just to see how they'd react, and it wasn't a trick. They weren't suspicious about us at all, even though we didn't know something we should have. I wondered why you did that,
Sten commented.
He's got a point, boss. I hate to admit it, but they should have caught on back there. We had better not stick around, then,
Ryu decided.
Let's go take a look at the Grand Cathedral as close as we can get, and then get out of here. Spar, I take it you're memorizing the city's layout as we go. As much of it as I can see, yes.
Spar nodded.
Good,
he said as they rounded a corner.
Now, let's.
He trailed off, eyes widening, as everybody else stared as well. Before them, a massive staircase rose into the sky as if it had been carved out of a mountainside and moved here simply to lead to the gigantic cliff at the rear of the town. The stairs looked to be at least a mile wide, and several of them long and tall. At their peak, the Grand Cathedral loomed, fully larger than both the ancient castle of Windia and the more recently constructed Sima Fort. Only the towers of High Fort came to memory as bigger.
I hate to state the obvious, here, boss, but I don't think we're gonna stand much chance of getting up there without being noticed,
Sten drawled.
Ever. I noticed.
Ryu glanced up the steps. 4 men in full suits of plate mail, each enameled a different color, were standing guard around the massive double doors.
And I think even we might have trouble taking down 4 paladins at once, if we can assume they're all almost as good as Ray is. Let alone the possibility that they might be demons. It is Ray,
Jean said, shrugging.
Did we expect it would be easy? Good point,
Bao admitted.
Still, this is gonna be a tough nut to crack. We should get going. Maybe Ner'll have some ideas. As long as somebody does,
Ryu muttered as they did an about-face and started walking back the way they came. Nobody spoke much as they headed out, and all of them looked troubled. Ryu figured that either they were already trying to come up with a plan, or Mina's sacrifice was still weighing on their minds. Or both, for a lot of them, including himself. They had kept up their usual banter for most of the day partially as a coping mechanism. It was habit by now, considering everything they had seen in their lives, even at this low point.
All right, there's the south gate,
he said quietly as it came within sight.
Just act casual.
Nobody seemed to notice or care as they strolled through it, and he fought the temptation to release a sigh of relief. And then the world twisted, and they were walking back into the city without turning or stopping.
Hey!
Kat yelped, as the others made similar noises of surprise and dismay.
What the hell just happened here? SHHHHH.
Dees hushed her, eyes wide.
Shit, 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 shit. Alright, keep walking. Casual, casual. I'm really hoping you know what's going on here,
Ryu said quietly as they strolled away down a random street, then froze as his eyes fell upon the same young man who had first hailed them. He was a shambling wreck, emaciated to the point of starvation with his skin tinted an unhealthy grey. His eyes were the worst of it, though, sunken and blank, they contained no trace of intelligence or emotion, just a horrible emptiness.
Welcome to ARandomAudiobookAppeared,
he was moaning mechanically, endlessly, without even looking at them.
Welcome to ARandomAudiobookAppeared. Welcome to ARandomAudiobookAppeared. Lawton,
Sten whispered.
what's going on here? Deez. It's worse than I thought.
Her eyes darted around the streets, and Ryu followed her gaze, only to see that everybody was like that now. Men, women, and even children, the young and the elderly, were all mindless horrors.
Crap. This entire city. The houses, the streets, the walls. It was all built in order to maintain a continual magic field throughout the entire area. They made this city this way on purpose. It was constructed with these spells in mind. I didn't even notice them until we actually stepped into the barrier effect. Yeah, but what's that actually mean?
Cat demanded, looking sick.
It means that this goes beyond mere corruption,
Nina told her, voice cold and dark as she looked around the city.
ARandomAudiobookAppeared is the birthplace of the Church of Saint Eva. What Deez is saying is that the permanent magic field was incorporated into the plans when it was first built. If we could see it from above, I'm sure we'd be able to recognize the design. In other words, from the very beginning, hundreds of years ago, the Church of Saint Eva was always a cover for the demons. They haven't infiltrated the church. They are the church, and they always have been. No way.
Bao blurted.
I mean. Yeah, some guys are obvious, but there's plenty of good people in there. The priest back in hometown, Father Jerome. There's no way he's dirty. And Ray. Yeah, we're on the outs with him right now, but he helped us kill demons. Hell, Ryu's father was a priest of Saint Eva. Dupes,
Sten guessed, glaring around him.
Makes sense that they couldn't recruit everybody who'd join up. Probably not even close. And they sure as hell can't just turn down folks who actually buy their bullshit and want to make the world a better place. People like that probably get sent out to unimportant positions in the rest of the world. The ones we'll be looking for will be at the top, for the most part. With just enough paladins to provide sufficient muscle. How horrible,
Spar murmured, actually looking as visibly disturbed as the rest of them, as a small child ran past them, laughing staccato.
What can be done about this? First things first,
Ryu said, shutting the imaginative part of his mind down hard. He knew that if he were to dwell on the implications of the revelation for long, it would completely occupy his thoughts, and there was no time for that at the moment.
We need to get out of here. Whatever happened to these people obviously isn't to us, but the longer we stay here, the more likely it is. Deez, is there any way out? Not directly.
Deez shook her head.
The magic field takes the shape of a dome, completely covering the entire city. Its primary function is the barrier we encountered. Any attempts to walk through it would simply become reversed. Even Nino wouldn't be able to fly out of here. It covers the sky as well. The only direction we can go without running into it is down. Ah, of course.
Jean brightened up, although it was obviously a pretense. His eyes were still clearly sickened by the people around them.
We must dig a tunnel to safety, yes? I read of that in a book once. Do you have any idea how long that would take?
Rand muttered.
Even if we could find a basement or something to start with.
He glanced at Deez and Nina.
Look, I don't know as much about magic as you two and Bao, but isn't there some way you could just bust a hole in it, or wreck this design that it's attached to, or something? You know, overload it. In theory.
Nina shook her head.
But this is strong magic, Rand. Strong and subtle. Like Deez said, none of us even realized it was there until we actually touched the barrier. The illusions were a secondary function, and look at how pervasive they were. All of our senses were completely fooled. I'm sure we would be able to damage it sufficiently to escape, given enough time, but there's no way we would be able to do so without attracting the attention of the paladins. Logically, there must be some way of passing through the barrier,
Spar said clinically.
And it must be a way that does not require one to know of the barrier's existence. Otherwise, Mr. Braddock and the others unaware of this vile secret would be unable to come and go as they please. So, we hide out until we find a paladin who we know is dirty, and force the secret out of him.
Ryu scowled.
I'm not sure I like that plan. Does anybody have a better one?
Sten pointed out.
I might,
Kat said, and everybody blinked before glancing at her. Contributing to the strategic part of a conversation would be unusual enough for her even had she sounded like her usual self. Arms wrapped around herself, looking even more shaken than the rest of them, she continued.
That crowd back there. They said the newest girl in town was named Clarice. Clarice Parsha. That's not a common name. No, it's not.
Ryu frowned. It was a familiar name, but not one that came to mind immediately.
I've heard it before, too. Where? That other group of pros we keep running into.
Bao snapped his fingers.
The Renegades. Remember, that one guy? Tigoli? Wasn't Claris the name of his number 2? That's right.
Nina's eyes widened.
And the last time we saw them, they were being bankrolled by Miss Smith. I could have gone without being reminded of that, actually,
Bao retorted, rolling his eyes, though the situation around them robbed it of any bite. Patty Smith, the self-proclaimed
phantom thief,
was an overly dramatic, cocky adolescent with a tendency to get herself in trouble, which they had been dragged into on numerous occasions. The only thing that seemed capable of sobering her was demonic activity. For some reason, she seemed to have a personal grudge against the agents of Infinity, as well as a great deal of knowledge on them she had never explained.
We never did find out just what she hired them for, but it was something big,
Ryu thought out loud, eyes narrowed.
And probably still ongoing. Never figured out just how much she knew about the demons, either. Could be she's been ahead of us this whole time. If this new lady in town is the same Claris, then, Lee probably sent her in to infiltrate this place. That's what I figured.
Kat nodded.
It's worth a shot, going to see, right? Worst case scenario, it'll be just another one of.
She shuddered.
These. And if she's not, maybe she'll know a way out of here. Let's check it out,
Ryu decided.
Pretty good idea. Don't get used to it.
She smiled weakly.
I'll leave the thinking to the rest of you 9 times out of 10. That just stuck with me, is all. Maybe it's because I really want to get out of here. An illness.
One of the old men who had been in the crowd stumbled by, face locked in a horrified grimace.
A terrible illness. It hurts. It hurts. I think we all do.
Bao backed away, trying to make it look casual.
Let's find this Brightway's place, now. I saw a street sign with that on it on the way here,
Spar told him, walking north, and the others followed it quickly.
It's not far. Good,
Sten grunted.
Cold.
A woman whispered, walking past them.
So cold. The touch of his hand. So cold, so very cold.
Nobody said anything, but they all began to walk a little faster, and soon they were at the street in question.
Ah, our destination,
Jean murmured as they all started looking around, trying to figure out which houses were inhabited.
Now, we simply must locate, oof.
A thrown rock had hit him right between the eyes.
Came from over there,
Kat said sharply.
3rd house down, on the right. 2nd story window. Have I ever mentioned you've got good eyes?
Sten told her as they all walked over. Before anybody else could, the Highlander reached out with one long arm and carefully pulled on the doorknob, swinging it open.
Unlocked. Either nobody worries about theft around here, or we're expected. Only one way to find out.
Ryu shrugged.
We should probably drop the disguises, though, so she recognizes us. Good thought,
Dees agreed, and with a flick of her wrist, the illusion disappeared as they all walked in. The inside of the house was as luxurious as the outside, all in wood with expensive-looking furniture. Paintings and tapestries covered every wall, the floor was carpeted, and several religiously themed statues were scattered in various places. 3 different doors and a staircase all led further into the house.
All right, now we just need to find the lady of the house,
Ryu muttered, looking around.
That'd probably be her aiming a crossbow at your head from those stairs, buddy,
Bao said, very slowly.
Mine too, in fact. Very observant, Mr. Dogi,
Claris replied as they all looked up at her.
I apologize for the implied threat, but one can't be too careful. If you wouldn't mind locking the door behind you.
Slim and tan, with bright red hair and cold blue eyes, she wore the same blue dress that bared her arms and legs as she had the last time they had met her. More importantly, she had a small but deadly-looking crossbow in each hand, one aimed at Ryu's head, the other at Bo's.
Sure.
Dees, the last one through the door, reached behind her and closed the several locks on it.
Are all of these standard, around here? Hardly,
Claris said coolly.
I installed them myself. Now then, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you what you're doing here in Evray. I'm guessing it's more or less the same thing you are,
Ryu told her calmly. It was far from the first time somebody had held his life in their trigger finger.
Reconnaissance, at the moment, in preparation for something more noisy sometime in the near future. Now then, let me ask you something, Miss Parsha. Do you believe in demons? If you had asked me that a year ago, I'd have told you that I wasn't much for jokes,
Clarice replied, sliding her crossbows onto a belt at her hip.
But it's been a very interesting year since then. Once again, my apologies, but I had to make sure you were alone. While your group does have an excellent reputation, I prefer not to take any risks.
Understandable, Ryu said, shrugging. Everybody else was silent now, though they were watching both him and her carefully.
We were the ones who came here to contact you in the first place, anyways, so we don't really have any room to complain about how you want to play it. Especially since we didn't even ask. Really, I'm just glad you seemed to know we were coming. I don't think surprising you would have been a good idea. I keep my eyes and ears open, especially in a place like this.
Clarice nodded, descending the stairs.
And I'm pleased to see that you're all professionals. Let's step into the dining room. I'm afraid I don't have anything cooked, but there's tea, at least. Tea actually sounds very good right now,
Nina said, and they all relaxed slightly, following Clarice into the room on the right. A steaming tea kettle was sitting on a tray on the massive dining table, along with 10 cups.
I see you really did know we were coming,
Sten noted as they sat down.
As I said, I've heard much about you,
Clarice replied, pouring them cups and passing them around.
As well as having met several of your number before. Knew you would remember us.
Kat smiled.
Glad to see you again, Clarice. You have no idea how good it is to see a friendly face here. Try living here for a couple weeks without it,
Clarice said after a moment, but despite the dryness of her voice, she actually smiled slightly for the first time Ryu had ever seen. Taking the last cup of tea for herself, she sat down at the head of the table.
I'd say it's nice to see you all again as well, but I must confess curiosity as to the circumstances.
Her voice turned slightly cold.
As well as to the conspicuousness. It's not my business to criticize your way of doing things, but strolling in through the front gate is hardly subtle. We were not yet aware of just how deep the enemy's control went,
Spar explained.
At the time, we believed the problem was mainly a case of corruption. Several high-ranking priests, perhaps a few paladins, and so on. Needless to say, we have since learned that the problem is much more severe than we thought. So, you didn't come here with the intent to oppose the church itself,
Clarice mused.
Miss Smith did tell me you had killed several demons, including some of their leaders. I take it, then, that your current employment is centered around that. You could say that, yes.
Ryu slowly nodded. With everything that had happened over the previous months, he had almost forgotten that they were in fact being hired and paid for what they were doing, on top of their own, more personal reasons.
Specifically, our employers want us to take down their top leader. Actually pulling that off is easier said than done, however. I imagine so.
Clarice shook her head.
As for my group, I'm sure you've already guessed by now that Miss Smith was already aware of this city's secrets. We've been hired to destroy the Church of Saint Eva, and everything connected to it. At first, I was curious as to what exactly her rationale was, but that became clear once we encountered our first demon. They're not exactly easy to mistake for anything else. Not hardly,
Dees agreed.
And this is coming from me, so you know it's bad. Indeed.
Clarice raised an eyebrow, but refrained from asking about the sorceress' unique appearance.
Well then. Since we have similar goals, it seems it would be appropriate to lend you a hand. Was there a particular reason you came to see me? We were kind of hoping you knew a way out of here,
Ryu admitted bluntly.
As Spar said, we didn't really expect things to be this bad here, and we definitely didn't see that magic barrier coming. And setting up shop here isn't really our style. The townspeople don't seem to notice, but I doubt we'd be able to fool a paladin.
He grimaced.
In retrospect, we really should have done more research before heading in. It might have been advisable,
Clarice agreed.
Fortunately, we managed to find information on the permanent magical field before I came in.
After a moment, she frowned.
Before I go on, perhaps we should come to an agreement on just how far this is going to go. If all you want is a way out, I'd be glad to let you use mine, provided you only do so to leave, and not to enter again. And if we were considering an actual alliance, seeing as how we seem to have the same goal in mind?
Bao asked keenly.
Then perhaps a further exchange of knowledge might be in order,
Clarice said, meeting Ryu's eyes.
It's an interesting possibility. I kind of like the sound of it myself,
Ryu agreed. He didn't really know Clarice or her boss, Tika, all that well just yet, but from what he had seen of them, they seemed like the kind of people his group could get along with. Glancing around at the others, he received nods from most of them and shrugs from the rest, and made his decision.
The leader of the demons, at least in this world, is named Baru Berry. He was last seen near the town of Gate, on an isolated peninsula of the same name due south of the Winland-Nana border, stirring up some kind of plague. Gate.
Clarice blinked.
How odd. Why would he be in Gate? There's absolutely nothing there, although that does explain the recent ecological damage. I wondered about that.
She frowned.
We were going to investigate, just in case, but Miss Smith said not to bother. Rather insistently, now that I think about it. The more I find out about Miss Smith, the more I have to wonder just what her deal is,
Kat commented lightly, exchanging a glance with Ryu. She, like the others, knew that Gate was his birthplace, before Aruhameral had come to erase everybody in town's memories of him, and cause the disappearance of his family.
I wouldn't know the details, myself.
Clarice shrugged.
I'm afraid she hasn't chosen to share them with us, and it wouldn't be professional to press her on it. At any rate, do you have a physical description of this Baru berry? About 40 feet tall,
Ryu said flatly, and she raised an eyebrow.
Real thick grey carapace over most of his body. 6 legs, set all around the bottom of his torso, kind of like a crab. 2 huge arms, with hooked claws instead of fingers. Vestigial wings. 3 eyes, the middle one seems capable of inducing mental contact. That's quite a description,
Clarice murmured.
I can see why he's their leader. How did you learn of him? Through our employers,
Ryu replied, semi-honestly. It was true, but that wasn't the first time he had encountered the greatest of demons. It was highly unlikely his childhood would ever be relevant to the Renegades, though, so he felt no guilt about leaving that out.
The Rangers Guild came to us to handle the matter after their best men ran into him. It didn't end well. I imagine not.
Clarice shook her head.
The guild is good for handling everyday matters, but this is hardly everyday. What about when he takes a humanoid form?
Ryu's eyes widened. Somehow, he had never thought about that possibility, even though every other demon he had seen had masqueraded as a humanoid before revealing their true nature. He had always thought of Baru berry as being on another level entirely, but now he saw the logic of her question, and wondered why he had never done so by himself.
We don't have any information on that, if he's ever even taken one. The plague in Gate is the only activity of his we know about. A pity.
She frowned.
I must confess, this is somewhat distressing. Until recently, we had concluded that the most likely candidate to be the leader of the demons was the Archpriest of Saint Eva, Father Habaruko. If he's only a subordinate, we might have to revamp our entire plan of operations. Tiga won't like that. Not necessarily,
Sten pointed out.
Like you said, you guys are being paid to demolish the Church of Saint Eva, right? If Barberry's not involved with the church, you guys don't have any reason to bother with him. Once the church is down, you'll be able to collect your pay, and leave cleaning Baru berry up to us. A valid point.
Clarice nodded.
I'm curious as to why you wouldn't try to press the terms of our prospective alliance to that point, though. Normally, I would expect you to want all the help you could get, for taking on something like that. Is there a personal stake involved here? Those rangers the guild sent after her were our friends,
Bao answered before Ryu could.
Me and Ryu used to be rangers ourselves before we went independent, you see. We'd kind of like to discuss that matter with Baru berry. In detail.
It wasn't entirely a lie, the two of them had worked with the unfortunate rangers who had encountered Baru berry, even if that was far from the greatest reason they wanted to handle him personally.
I'd heard that you were, but was unable to authenticate it,
Clarice replied.
I suppose that makes a certain amount of sense. Very well, then. You'll have to finalize this arrangement with Tiga himself, of course, but I'll make sure to include this in my next message to him, along with my approval of the alliance. You can get messages out of here.
Dees raised an eyebrow.
I'd be interested to hear how you manage that. People have used magic for long-distance communications for so long, most of them have forgotten about other ways,
Clarice explained.
I managed to sneak quite a few homing pigeons in here when I arrived. Very nice,
Spar said approvingly.
You planned this out thoroughly. I've been preparing for this part of the operation for 3 months now, ever since Tika, Miss Smith, and I spent an evening working out our plan,
she continued.
It's changed in a few ways since then. None of us really believed in demons until we saw one for ourselves, but the basics of the plan remain the same. I'll stay here collecting intelligence for another month or so, and then when the team moves in for the final operation, I'll get them into the Grand Cathedral. Tika will fill you in on the rest of it once you meet him. So, if you didn't believe in demons right away, does that mean at first you just thought you were taking down the Church of Saint Eva because Miss Smith was paying you for it?
Rand asked slowly.
That's correct,
Clarice said.
We're professionals, Mr. Marks. We try not to do undue harm to our fellow man, but for the most part, morality is a secondary priority compared to profit. Is that going to be a problem? Not at all.
Ryu shook his head while glancing at Rand, who shrugged.
Not our business how you run your ship. We're not trying to take over. Way I see it, we work together, there'll be less risk involved, and we'll both stand a better chance of collecting our paychecks a lot sooner. Once that's taken care of, we all head out for drinks and then go our separate ways. That will work out just fine, then.
Clarice suddenly smiled again, making her look strangely younger and gentler than her usual cold persona.
I think you'll get along well with Tika, Mr. Battison. You seem to be a lot like him. He seems like a good guy.
Ryu smiled as well.
Let's hope so. Well then, I'll show you the way out.
Finishing her tea, Clarice stood and walked towards the back of the manor, and they all followed her towards a staircase leading down into a basement.
There's a fairly large network of caverns beneath Evray. That's how I got in here in the first place. We were able to break through the wall of this house's basement.
She stared at the wall for a moment, eyes growing dull.
Of course, I didn't expect anything like this. I don't think anybody could,
Nina told her.
Do you know what it is? What's wrong with them? Their souls,
Clarice said quietly.
I wasn't really sure I believed in such things either, but it's the only thing that makes sense, for what we've seen these demons doing. They're taking people's souls, and giving them to their god, and those things out there are what's left. Everybody in this city who isn't an actual member of the faith. That's what really convinced us to see this job out. Even by our standards, this is an abomination.
Before she could say anything more, everybody froze as they heard a loud knocking on the front door of the manor.
Miss Parsha.
A male voice called out.
Are you there? We've heard there were some suspicious strangers in this part of the city. Damn.
Clarice recovered quickly, all business once more.
It's the paladins. One of them has a crush on me, so I'll be fine, but you need to get out of here, now. Get down there, and close the secret passage behind you. It's behind the bookshelf. You'll have to move it yourself, but somehow, I think you'll be able to manage that. Oh, yeah.
Cat grinned.
No problem. Alright, we'll get out of your hair. Good seeing you again, Clarice. We'll have to go get some beer together once this is all over. I'll hold you to that, Cat.
Clarice smiled again, and they rapped knuckles together as the others headed through the door. Another banging on the door caused her smile to disappear, though.
Quickly, now. Go.
Without waiting for a response, she began walking quickly towards the front of the house, calling out.
I'm sorry, I was in the bathroom. I'm coming. You seem to have made fast friends with her,
Dees told Kat as the two of them followed Ryu down into the basement, closing the door behind them.
We talked for a little back in Sky Tower.
Kat shrugged.
She helped me explain a few things to that idiot Spoo, and we got to chatting. I don't know, for some reason, I just get the feeling she's a lot more like me than she acts. And it's not just because of the hair. Tika said the rest of his crew are a bunch of goons,
Rand said as they entered the basement. The big man was already standing next to a massive, glass-fronted bookcase. The rest of the room was filled with boxes and old furniture.
Maybe Clarice only acts so serious because she figures somebody has to be. You want to give me a hand with this so I don't make any noise? Yeah, sure.
Kat walked over, and they took up positions on either side of the bookcase. Despite her slim build, the Warren girl's heritage granted her the breath of spirit, which gave her ridiculous strength, speed, and agility, though not durability. It had taken her most of a decade to learn how to use her abilities to the fullest without breaking her own bones. Together, the two of them managed to lift the bookcase off the ground and carry it forward, exposing a tunnel into a natural cavern.
I must be the only one here who hasn't met this Tika guy so far. What's he like, anyways? Kind of like Ryu, but more rowdy.
Sten shrugged.
Real playboy, though. Probably goes through a dozen girlfriends a year. At least,
Nina added dryly, creating a sphere of magical light that hovered above her hand, illuminating the cavern ahead of them.
He seems good-natured enough, I suppose. Wouldn't want to go up against him, though,
Bao said as they moved into the secret passage.
Looked like the kind of guy who could probably take on a whole mob all by himself. Okay, now I'm curious.
Kat grinned as she and Rand moved behind the bookcase, side by side. Picking it up again from behind, they carried it with them as they walked backwards into the tunnel, and then lowered it to the floor.
I've got to meet this guy. Do you know where these renegades run out of, usually? Last I heard, the Isle of Guns,
Ryu said.
Looks like we'll be making a trip there after all. We should probably stop back home first and see if anything's come up, though. Nero can usually handle it, but knowing our luck, the first time we assume that'll always be the case. We'll come back to find a smoking crater where it used to be.
Dees guessed brightly.
You would like that, wouldn't you?
Rand rolled his eyes.
Don't answer that. Let's just get out of here before something worse happens. Which way do we go, anyways?
Everybody looked over the network of caverns before them, several different passages leading off in various directions. None looked promising.
Perhaps we should have asked that when we had the chance,
Jean pointed out.
Gee, you think?
Bao rolled his eyes.
Let's hope we get out of here before nightfall. Think there's monsters in here.
On cue, an abomination of evolution walked out of one tunnel and turned all of its heads to stare at them. From the body of a lion, a second head sprouted alongside the first, this one that of a goat. Its tail was a snake, ending in a third head, and from its back, massive black bat wings spread.
Didn't we talk about saying things like that?
Ryu gave Bao a sour look, drawing his sword.
On multiple occasions. Yeah.
Bao sighed, aiming and firing his crossbow as the beast leaped forward.
My bad.
Both bolts slammed into its flank, and it stumbled, falling back to the ground as Cat ran straight towards it.
Hey, I ain't complaining,
she said cheerfully, flipping sideways over its attempt to eviscerate her with one claw and slamming her battlestaff into the side of one head, causing it to collide with the other.
Could use a little adrenaline after what happened back there, hey? Whoa.
She dodged back, away from the lion head's fangs, and swung the other end of her staff up into its jaw, only for it to claw at her again.
You're always in the mood for that,
Ryu pointed out, reaching her side and slashing at the forepaw. Roaring, the beast charged them both, snapping at each of them with its twin heads as the snake hissed in anger, unable to reach them. Cat jumped back, but Ryu was less agile. Fortunately, the goat's teeth were unable to penetrate his armor, and he took the opportunity to remove the offending skull with another swing of his sword.
Good work, but it doesn't look like that'll stop it,
Dees told them as he stepped back as well, raising her wooden cane in the air as Nina did the same with the focusing ring on her hand. A miniature tornado suddenly appeared inside the cavern, bearing down on the beast and picking it up, slamming it viciously into various surfaces before dissipating as soon as it had come.
What is that thing, anyways? A chimera,
Nina told her as it staggered back to its feet, only for her to create a block of ice in the shape of a double-faced head before it. Opening the eyes and mouth facing the beast, it breathed freezing mist straight into it, covering the lion's head in ice.
We studied them at the magic school as an example of biomancy gone horribly wrong. A shame they breed. I always wondered where they were actually found. Well, now we know.
Cat grinned, leaning on her staff.
That was fun, whoa.
Her eyes widened as it lunged for her and Ryu again, only for a pair of massive hands to close on their backs and yank them back out of harm's way as one of Sten's knives flew through the air, burying itself in the beast's chest and causing it to stumble again.
Watch out,
Rand told them unnecessarily, holding them in the air, as sparse thorned whip wrapped around it, holding it down.
It's still got one functioning brain. Somebody want to do something about that. It is already done,
Jean told him, casually stepping behind the chimera and skewering the tail snake. As it died, the entire beast finally did so as well.
A good thing that we encountered the beast in such an enclosed area, yes? I would not relish having to engage such a thing with full flight under an open sky. It never ceases to amaze me, you know.
Sten commented, retrieving his knife.
Your ability to not only find an upside to this kind of situation, but that it actually makes sense. That's a pretty rare talent. Thank you, mon ami.
Jean nodded politely.
I think. Let's go,
Ryu grunted.
And hope we can find the closest way out with running into any more of those. That way.
Spar pointed towards the tunnel the chimera had climbed out of.
I can sense the grass outside the caverns most clearly in that direction. Have I ever mentioned how glad I am you're on the team?
Dees told it as they walked down the tunnel without question. They all trusted the grassman's odd ability to navigate by the breath of nature by now, having seen it in action on multiple occasions. It wasn't long before they saw the light of the setting sun up ahead, and soon climbed out of a cavern set into the side of a grassy hill, about a mile away from Evray.
We done here, then?
Bao asked.
For now.
Ryu glanced upwards, as the great bird flew overhead.
But we'll be back. And next time, we play for keeps.
They made their camp there, that night, deciding to wait until the next day before leaving. Around a small, enclosed campfire, they dined on travel rations over jokes and stories, as casual as if it were just another day. None of them believed it, but they'd all had a lot of practice at pretending otherwise. Soon enough, they turned in, Ryu among them. Spart and Jean had the first watch that night, and so he got his sleep while he could. Power. We need yet more of your power. God needs more of your power. Give your soul to God. Pray to God. Praise God. Sacrifice your heart and mind to God. You will become God's power. With a gasp, he jerked upright, the voice of Baruberry still haunting his mind, as it had in his dreams every night of his life for the past 10 years. After a quick look around to confirm that he hadn't woken anybody else, he lay back down and tried to sleep again, though it was far from forthcoming. Winter was coming, and it was starting to grow cold. Do you still wait for your God?